Hey there everyone, welcome back to Utility Sports. Super excited for this video as we're going to have even more 2024 NBA trade deadline predictions. We're in the week of the trade deadline, which means there's a lot going on here on the channel. I'm super excited for it. So let's jump into our video preview here, where I'm going to give you one more prediction for each NBA team. So for those of you who've seen other content here, you probably saw my trade deadline predictions a week or two ago that came out, where I made a bunch of predictions about NBA teams. Some of them have already come to fruition, like the Pascal Siakam trade for both the Pacers and Raptors. In that video, I also talked about how I expected the Pelicans to salary dump Kira Lewis Jr. So I've had a good track record of this already, and I wanted to record one more with completely new predictions for each and every NBA team. And then I also wanted to tell you guys, I'm going to be live streaming all week long, starting Monday morning and going all the way through Thursday during the trade deadline as it actually passes. I won't be streaming 24 hours a day, but pretty darn close. We'll be live on the channel a ton, so if that's something you guys are interested in, first of all, go check right now. Am I live streaming? Be a great thing to have you hop in there, ask some questions. We do a lot of Q&As and a whole bunch of NBA discussion about all 30 NBA teams. And also, just don't forget to leave a like and subscribe on today's video. If you are new and enjoyed the content, I would love to have you be a part of what we do here at Utility Sports. And now, first team here, we've got the Atlanta Hawks to talk about. And my most recent one, I talked about DeJounte Murray and Clint Capella and how I thought the Hawks might be headed toward a little bit of a fire sale this trade deadline, which I still expect. And now my new prediction for them is trying to find a home for D'Angelo Russell, because when it comes down to it, my expectation is that DeJounte Murray will be a Los Angeles Laker. D'Angelo Russell has had a good stretch of games here over the last couple of weeks or so. And I still think, while Los Angeles is probably happy to see that and they're happy he's had a good showing, I still think that remnants of the 2023 Western Conference Finals, where D'Angelo Russell just seemingly could not hit a shot against the Denver Nuggets, that's probably still in the back of Lakers executives' minds, as well as just kind of the overall thought that DeJounte Murray is just a better player than D'Angelo Russell. And while the Lakers probably, in my opinion, shouldn't make that kind of move where they're kind of making a small upgrade here into DeJounte Murray, who I do think is quite a bit better than D'Angelo Russell, I'm not sure he's the exact fit I would want next to LeBron James, but my current expectation is DeJounte Murray will be a Laker, and then off of that, the Atlanta Hawks have to figure out some third team here for D'Angelo Russell. Where will he be playing basketball? My big prediction is that's Atlanta's problem to figure out right now, and no longer the Los Angeles Lakers. Jumping into the next team here, the Boston Celtics. We're going in alphabetical order in this video. And the Celtics, well, this is a really good team. They're the best team in basketball, which is what I expected coming into the year. If you go back to my season preview for Boston, I was super high on this team. I was super high on the Porzingis acquisition, and I viewed them as virtually unguardable because of their ability to stretch the floor. All five guys can shoot the basketball. They've been really darn good, and I really like the way this team is constructed. I do think, though, that with their current roster, maybe there's just one small move that they could make to get an upgrade. Here I have Andre Drummond. It doesn't necessarily mean that Andre Drummond's going to be a Boston Celtic. What I'm looking here for is just someone to fill some center minutes for this team. I understand that they have Luke Cornett, and he's played very well this year. I think, though, if you're Boston and you're looking at title contention, you have to find a way to beat Miami. Obviously, Bam Adebayo is a big challenge on his own. Then you also have to theoretically go through Philly. We'll see what Embiid's status is. As of right now, it seems like everything's kind of cloudy in that area of what his availability is going to be going into this postseason. But in a hypothetical that you match up with Philadelphia and he's healthy, you have to slow him down and stop him. Last year, Boston did a good job of doing so, of course, advanced past Philadelphia, but having another big body in the room helps with that, especially given Porzingis' injury history. As a Mavs fan myself, I totally understand that, you know, down the stretch of a season, guys can get injured, and it's not just Porzingis' fault, but you want to have a little bit of insurance protection against that. So getting one more big man in the room would make some sense. In my last predictions video, I talked about how I expected them to maybe even shave some money off their roster a little bit. I pointed to Svi Mikhailuk as a possibility of that. But if there's an option here to go get a center who can help them a bit on the boards and body down low a little bit on the minimum, which is why I have Drummond visualized here on the graphic, because he kind of embodies a lot of those things, Boston should at least explore some of those possibilities this trade deadline. Going into our next team, the Brooklyn Nets, and they just seemingly cannot catch a break. Ben Simmons comes back, then he's out again. Ben Simmons comes back, and he's out again. And outside of just that, the Nets kind of seem like a weird team right now. Spencer Dinwiddie, there's reports going around that he's not happy there in Brooklyn, which is, pretty funny because he's Spencer Dinwiddie. Wasn't really expecting that this season. But there's just a lot of, hodgepodge pieces here. In my last trade deadline predictions, I talked about how I expect Mikal Bridges to stay with the Brooklyn Nets past the trade deadline. I still expect that to be true, although there is a possibility. You never know. Brooklyn maybe becomes open to trading him. But one guy who I do think definitely does get traded is Royce O'Neal. That is my big prediction in this video. Royce O'Neal will be playing for a different team after this trade deadline. And I'll never forget, in the offseason when they traded one first-round pick to acquire Royce O'Neal, amidst the Kevin Durant trade request, I was completely shocked and befuddled by why would they do that? Why would they go trade for Royce O'Neal right now? Part of that was they were trying to keep Kevin Durant happy, keep Kyrie Irving happy. They were trying to jump through a bunch of hula hoops to keep the stars happy. Well, the Nets no longer have that issue, and I think moving off of Royce O'Neal, trying to move off of Dorian Finney-Smith for the right package are things that the Nets should do, and I think that they especially will, centered around Royce O'Neal, maybe getting 3 or 4 second-round picks like we saw last year with Jay Crowder when the Bucks gave up 5 second-rounders to get him from Phoenix, or maybe even just one lower-level first-round pick to get off of Royce O'Neal. Something like that is something I think we should all expect from the Nets this trade deadline. The Chicago Bulls, what a weird season they've had. Zach LaVine gets injured. The team was terrible to start the year, just like I had expected. But then all of a sudden, LaVine goes out. Kobe White starts playing better. Patrick Williams played some of the best basketball of his career. And all of a sudden, the team was, not good. I wouldn't say good, but they were better. And then Zach LaVine tried coming back. And then, well, guess what? Season-ending surgery all of a sudden. It's a weird year for Chicago. It really is. But I think one thing is safe and certain. They will not trade Alex Caruso. That is what all of my signs point to right now around the Chicago Bulls, is that they view Alex Caruso as a key integral piece of what they want their team identity and culture to look like, not just this season, but going forward. He has another year on his contract, and I'm sure he'd be a player that the Bulls would love to keep past the duration of his current contract as well. I think that they like what he stands for, the way that he plays. He cuts, passes, moves, defends. He's one of the more versatile players in the league, and honestly, we've seen the effect Derek White has had with the Boston Celtics. I think the Bulls view Caruso as that same level player, as a guy who, around the right pieces, can do a lot of those right things. Now, I don't think he's quite as good as Derek White, but I think the Bulls view him in that same light, and that's why they're not eager to get rid of him, especially when they're right in a spot where they're trying to figure out what to do with LaVine, DeRozan, all these other pieces. I think the safe thing is keeping Caruso, have him be a real benchmark of what you want your team to look like, and then going off of that, you find pieces that probably elevate your actual team floor. Caruso's not one of those guys who's going to guarantee you a 40-win season, but on the edges next to some stars, he does a lot of really great things. So I think as Chicago figures out their team identity, makes a bunch of moves over the next 4 to 12 months, Caruso is going to be a mainstay there in Chicago. Going into the Cleveland Cavaliers, this is one of the hardest teams to kind of identify what they're going to do because of a collection of things. They have a bunch of middling salaries that I theoretically would like to package into deals. Someone like George Niang making a little bit under $8 million. I'm looking at Max Strus's contract, looking at Dean Wade's contract, and then looking at Karis LeVert, he's making a little bit over $15 million. There's a lot to work with there in terms of salaries, but I just can't really see the Cavaliers being willing to trade those guys, and I'm not exactly sure who the upgrade is or where the upgrade's coming from in a trade. What I do know, though, is the Cavaliers could still use one more shooter, and that was a big point of emphasis for them this offseason. They did a great job doing so, getting Max Strus and George Niang. I remember in my free agency live streams here on the channel, I said, look, those are big paydays for guys who maybe aren't worth all of that money. I think that's been vindicated a little bit, but at the same time, just the half-court spacing, the recent win streak, the Cavaliers have looked much better this year in some ways. Even when Darius Garland and Evan Mobley both went out with injuries, the Cavs were able to not only stay afloat, but win a bunch of ball games because of Mitchell, because of Jared Allen, and then the surrounding pieces around them. And I think, again, one more shooter, finding either someone who is close to the minimum, maybe on the biannual exception, somewhere around $4 million, or if they do end up making some bigger trade around $7 to $9 million, if that means Okoro goes out, which I don't love, or if that means George Niang gets rerouted somewhere. We'll see what they do, but I just think one more shooter in the building makes some sense for the Cavaliers and their team construction. And also a guy that I wanted to highlight too, I almost forgot to mention him, Mike Muscala. He got traded just recently, but I think he's a player that would actually make a good deal of sense in Cleveland if that becomes a possibility for them. Going on to the Charlotte Hornets. Interesting team to talk about here. Brandon Miller is in a great stretch of basketball. He's been playing some of the best basketball I've ever seen him play, including his time at Alabama, where he was sensational, phenomenal, and a really good prospect. People forget that I had him in the top 5 on my board for a reason, with labeled potential All-NBA potential. There's a reason I said those things, because he was really, really good. Charlotte here still, though, can't win games. They're just not a good franchise. They don't have a good head coach. Steve Clifford goes on in front of a microphone and says we're under-talented, but what he doesn't understand is he's saying that with Miles Bridges scoring 20 points a game. He's saying that with LaMelo Ball on a rookie max extension for a reason. He's saying that with Brandon Miller probably going to make an all-rookie first team for a reason. He has talent. He's just not a very good coach, and he doesn't utilize the talent to its maximum. And yes, I get it. The Hornets have been injured this year, this, that, and the other thing. They also had Terry Rozier. I mean, they've had good players. They just don't win games. And sometimes you have to look in the mirror if you're Steve Clifford, because he's not part of the solution, I'll tell you that. What I do want to focus on here is Gordon Hayward, and it's really more of a topic a little bit bigger than Gordon Hayward, but I think the Hornets are going to be the most active team this trade deadline. That has been something that, since the Terry Rozier trade, has really just sat in my mind, and I've pondered more and more about what the Hornets have to do at the deadline and how active will they be. I've been very aware of what this team is going to try to do and what my expectations are for them, which is to turn expiring contracts into bad salaries. And the reason that they're going to do that is to get draft picks. So if there's teams right now dangling first and second round picks to get off of certain money, the Hornets are the best team to call for a couple of reasons. They've got players that are expiring like Kyle Lowry and Gordon Hayward. They've also got some interesting former lottery picks like James Bouknight, who just haven't worked out very well, and maybe in a new situation can find a little bit more footing in the league. I'm not saying thrive, because I'm not sure if Bouknight's going to thrive anywhere, but just maybe they find a role somewhere in the league. So the Hornets have a couple of those that they could attach to some of these expiring contracts, not to Lowry's because of the aggregation rules, but they could theoretically do so to Hayward's contract. And maybe the Hornets are just able to bring in more and more draft capital, whether that's 3-4 second round picks, maybe that's 1 or 2 more first round picks, whatever that ends up looking like. The Hornets should be calling pretty much anyone and everyone to try and help other teams out in the salary cap. And by doing so, they get off of some of these expiring contracts for longer term contracts and still continue their rebuild that way, because it's just clear they're not heading in a direction of winning in the next year or two probably. So again, taking a longer term approach here makes the most sense to me. They also have PJ Washington, who makes a ton of sense as a potential trade candidate, although remember, he sat in restricted free agency pretty much all summer long. So I'm not sure if the interest from other teams is going to be there enough to get the Hornets to agree to a deal. So really the best thing is focus on those expiring contracts, Gordon Hayward, Kyle Lowry. I think one of the two get moved, if not both of them, this trade deadline. Then the Dallas Mavericks. This is my favorite team here, and I'm telling you right now, I'm dreading this as a possibility, what I'm about to talk about here in this segment, because I think this would be a horrible move for the organization if they figure something like this out in a trade. I just would hate it. And that is Jeremy Grant going to the Dallas Mavericks. And it's not just Jeremy Grant, okay? I'm using some of these players as symbols or representatives of an idea or position. Really, for the Dallas Mavericks, I think it's going to be a bigger forward. Someone who is a hybrid 3-4, can play off of Luka Doncic and Kyrie Irving, can knock down shots and handle the basketball to a certain extent. In the most recent video I did of this, I talked about Andrew Wiggins as a Maverick possibility, and I still think that's in the cards here as a possibility, but I do want to touch on Jeremy Grant, and perhaps me manifesting it here is not good, because I hate the idea of Jeremy Grant playing for the Dallas Mavericks. And I know a lot of people are going to say, what, he scores 20 points a game as a forward and he shoots the ball really well, how would you not want that? Because he doesn't rebound the basketball. For how athletic he is, for how big of a wing he is, he's got to be one of the worst actual rebounders for his position in NBA history, which is okay for other teams. It's okay if he was playing in Minnesota. It's okay if he was playing in Denver next to Nikola Jokic. Guess what? He wouldn't be. In Dallas, he'd be playing next to a rookie center in Derek Lively and Dwight Powell. So take that as you will. I don't think he solves any of the Mavericks' issues, really. I think he'd be a more reliable play off the catch type of player, but that doesn't move the needle enough for Dallas to move from being a team in the play-in mix all the way up to a team that I think could make the conference finals. And if you're Dallas, with the lack of trade flexibility you have to be super cautious and wait until this summer when you have potentially 3 first-round picks at your disposal to trade instead of just 1. So if I'm Dallas, I would be completely patient, but knowing the Mavericks, knowing Nico Harrison, they make a trade every single deadline. Watch out for Jeremy Grant, watch out for Andrew Wiggins, watch out for some tweener forward who can shoot the basketball to a certain extent. I say that with air quotes for Andrew Wiggins. Just watch out for someone who's going to play the 3 or 4 for the Dallas Mavericks. That's really my big takeaway here. Then when it comes to the Denver Nuggets, and this is one of those hard teams to figure out because guess what? I'm sure they'd love to get Bruce Brown back. The salaries, though, just don't really line up for them to do anything like that. They don't have a bunch of tradable salaries that I look at and say, yeah, this team would love to give that player up to get this, that, or the other thing back. The Nuggets are the reigning champions. I think internally they still feel really good about the team that they are, the talent that they have around Nikola Jokic, and we know how good Jamal Murray is. One of the big playoff risers, which is very atypical. Most times you have playoff droppers, not risers. Jamal Murray is one of those few risers in the league that goes from not even being an all-star caliber player to all of a sudden playing like an all-NBA player. When the game slows down, they really hunt their two-man matchups. The Nuggets are just so devastating to other teams. For that reason, I don't see them doing much of anything. Maybe a small move on the margins, right? Maybe you find an 8th or 9th guy. But there's not one standing out to me that I'm like, this is what Denver will for sure do. I feel like they feel good about DeAndre Jordan as their backup big man. Last year in the finals, he played a couple of minutes. And then you also look at Reggie Jackson. I think they feel pretty good about him as their backup point guard. So they like their young guys. I think that they're asking a lot out of them, and I think that's going to be good for their long-term development, the fact that they have roles and that they're relied upon at times. Julian Strawther's had moments this year. We know Peyton Watson, how he's developing and growing as a wing in this league. I think Denver feels good about where they actually are right now, and because of that, I'm not going to really sound any alarms of, oh, they need this or they need that. I feel like they look at themselves as the best team in the league, and I can't really argue with them because we just saw it last summer when they went on to win the finals. Looking at the Detroit Pistons now, we go from the best team to the worst team. The Pistons might finish the year in single digits, but that might not stop them from buying. This is what we call the Troy Weaver special. I want you guys to comment that down below right now. If you get to this part of the video, comment the Troy Weaver special, and that would be buying at the deadline an injured player when you're the worst team in the league. Oh my goodness. I thought about changing this to Killian Hayes on the graphic, by the way, because I was going to jokingly say that he got traded to France to go play for Cholet in the LNB Pro A or something, but I didn't want to be that mean. So instead I'm making fun of their GM here, Troy Weaver, saying that he's going to trade for an injured player to try and make his team better, because this is a realistic possibility. The Pistons have some salaries that make sense. Joe Harris's expiring contract is a big reason why this is something that's doable. And then you also from there have Bojan Bogdanovic's contract. So the two of those guys together, plus a little bit more salary, gets you right in the ballpark to acquire someone like Zach LaVine. And there's a lot going on in my mind right now thinking about the Detroit Pistons. Okay, with the Killian Hayes speculation, by the way, like if he gets traded, I do not care. That might be something like when I'm live streaming on the channel. Remember to go check if I'm streaming right now. Be fun to have you guys in that stream. If Killian Hayes gets traded, first of all, I'm going to take a victory lap around my recording studio here because I gave them an F grade when they took him. Every Pistons fan got mad at me. I ended up being right. I said that taking him over Tyrese Halliburton was a terrible decision for the franchise. Newsflash, it was. Like, getting Zach LaVine, like, back onto the topic. Sorry, I'm just all over the place with the Pistons right now. Getting Zach LaVine, like, in a vacuum, that's not terrible for Detroit because realistically, if we're being honest about it, what are they going to do with cap space? The answer to that is probably not good stuff. They'd maybe max out Tobias Harris or something. I don't trust them with cap space is what I'm really trying to say here, especially in this free agency when Philadelphia also projects to have cap space if they want to use it. Detroit's in a spot where they probably aren't getting the top free agents available. From there, you're probably overpaying veterans that aren't going to move the needle enough for you. Zach LaVine is a true all-star scorer. Now, he's not an all-star in the other areas, like a passer or definitely not a defender, but Detroit needs some scoring help. They need someone who can space the floor and shoot the basketball. I actually think he's a very good fit off of Cade Cunningham, and I do think you could play him next to Jaden Ivey and Cade Cunningham in a vacuum. Now, with Monty Williams, this would be a terrible fit. Zach LaVine's not a good point of attack defender, and Monty Williams famously brings zero help defense or very little help defense. This year he's adjusted a little bit, especially in the last couple of weeks or so, bringing a bit more help defense, but I don't think it's coached very well. Nonetheless, like, Zach LaVine to Detroit, it's better than what they currently have. Again, they have like 4 or 5 wins. They're just not very good. But it's not, this isn't going to be great for Detroit. And depending, if they give up draft picks, oh my goodness, like then we're looking at a Blake Griffin 2.0 situation where a team that's not ready to contend or to buy ends up selling too much anyway. But if it's something around contracts like Bogdanovich and Joe Harris, it would be a pretty good move for Detroit, even though, again, I don't think it makes them a good team. I do think they would get better by making that kind of trade. Let's talk about Golden State now. A very interesting team and honestly a very disappointing team. I thought this team was going to be a bit better this year. I thought Chris Paul was going to be a good addition. I think for the most part he has been, but of course has missed some time with injury now. And then I did not foresee Draymond Green going off the rocker completely, which I probably should have given his circumstances with Jordan Poole and just throughout his entire career. But it's been a real up and down year for the Warriors. I think one of the positive ups is Jonathan Kuminga is looking more and more like a star every single day. He's had multiple 20-point games in the last month. He's just been playing really great basketball. But really the question here circles around Klay Thompson. And a lot of people want to know, are the Warriors going to be active at the trade deadline and in what ways? Because you could look at it a few different angles. You could look at them trying to make some big-time win-now trade where a team that's currently 12th or 11th in the Western Conference tries to take a big step forward. That's kind of hard to see happen, especially in February when you're so close to the season's end already. So I'm a little skeptical on that. I also think that people want to know, will they completely sell their pieces? Will they trade away Draymond Green or Klay Thompson? Will they salary dump Andrew Wiggins somewhere? And those are good questions too. My answer to those things specifically on Klay Thompson is no. I can't see them trading Klay Thompson to save some money, and I really just don't see them trading Klay Thompson in general. While, yes, he's a big $40 million salary that's expiring, technically the Warriors could go out and do something like that. I just really can't see it being what actually happens, and the reason for that is because he's a part of a dynasty. They won 4 titles, made it to several finals with Klay Thompson, Draymond Green, Steph Curry really as the core nucleus of the team. And with that being the case, I just can't see Mike Dunleavy, their new GM, was the assistant GM beforehand before Bob Myers left. I can't see him being the guy that broke that up. So for that reason, I'm going to say Klay Thompson stays in Golden State past the trade deadline this year, and then probably gets a nice 3 or 4 year extension done with the Warriors, similar to what we saw Draymond Green sign this past offseason, inking him to Golden State for the foreseeable future as well. Then we look at the Houston Rockets, who I actually just had the privilege of watching in person last night on Sunday, February 4th. They were not very good in that game. The Minnesota Timberwolves completely shellacked them. Their defense just overwhelmed Houston, but that's okay because it's been a very good season for the Houston Rockets. I still have a little bit of belief in Jalen Green. I know that's probably going to get everyone mad in the comment section because everyone hates Jalen Green right now, but I think Jalen Green does some things that are really underrated, and I think he's taken steps forward in a lot of areas of his game outside of scoring. Now, the scoring hasn't really improved, and honestly, you could say even maybe took a step back this year. Those are okay statements to make, and I don't disagree with that. But this team's been playing good, and I mean, he's been adjusting to Fred VanVleet. He's been adjusting to an actual NBA-level head coach for the first time in his career. I think Houston's on the up and up, and I'm a big believer in their young talent. I really like what they have going forward. One player that I think that they will trade, though, is Jae'Sean Tate. With the way that Cam Whitmore's been playing as of late, I know kind of a shaky game on Sunday against the Timberwolves, I think Cam Whitmore is going to be the long-term small forward for the Houston Rockets in whatever way you want to frame that, right? In their starting lineup right now, it's Dillon Brooks. But Cam Whitmore has just been playing such great basketball. I had a top 10 grade on him in my 2023 NBA draft big board by the very end, and I loved him throughout the entire process as a scorer coming out of Villanova. And I think we've seen so many flashes from him already in his career that we're just pretty confident. And Ime Udoka himself, in the pregame press media availability, he said that he sees superstar potential in Cam Whitmore. So for me, Jae'Sean Tate looks like the odd man out here a little bit. He's making a little bit over $6 million this year. He's got a very tradable contract, and I think that's something, if Houston's looking to make another move, they already made the Steven Adams trade, which I really love for the Rockets, by the way. It gives them more flexibility in their lineups and gives them a really good backup big man because they just clearly don't trust Jock Landale. I think that the Rockets have tradable deals in Landale and in Jae'Sean Tate, and I think that they're going to go out in the marketplace, explore some deals, and really get something done that they want to at the trade deadline to either improve their roster a little bit, maybe get a starting caliber player if they're willing to give up some draft picks to do so. Otherwise, it might just be a collection of, here's some second round picks and Jae'Sean Tate's contract and Jock Landale's expiring contract for player X, Y, or Z. And I think that's the way the Rockets are going to operate. So Jae'Sean Tate, probably won't be seeing him in a Rockets uniform past the deadline, if you ask me. Just his roles diminished, and I just don't know if he gives you a lot if you're Houston going forward. Then the Indiana Pacers, they've already made their big splashy trade this year when they traded for Pascal Siakam. Of course, he was a big-time addition, and I think it's something that made a lot of sense for the Pacers, getting into pre-agency, trading for a guy that they would have had interest in signing, making sure that you get to sell him on the idea of being with your franchise next to Tyrese Haliburton. I think that all makes some good sense. And then people want to know, well, will Buddy Hield get traded? And there's this rumor going around that Indiana still might not be done, that they have other pieces to trade, and they definitely do. I just don't know if that makes the most sense for them. If I was Indiana, I think I'd want to just kind of be a little bit more patient, step on the brakes a little bit. Let's really see how Haliburton and Siakam play together. Let's see how they fit next to this group of players that we currently already have. And yes, I know Buddy Hield, big expiring contract. Do you want to turn him into something? I don't know what you turn him into yet. If it's not Mikal Bridges, because I just don't think the Nets are going to be likely to trade him this deadline, I just don't know if there's a player out there that really moves me if I'm Indiana that I say, I 100% trust that this guy will be a good fit next to Haliburton, Turner, Mathurin, and Siakam going forward. And if you can't find that player, I just don't think you rush it. Aaron Nesmith's already a really good 3-and-D wing. I think the Pacers have a good amount of their nucleus and their core already in place. I don't think that they should panic. I don't think that they should make any big crazy trades unless it's for Mikal Bridges. I just think that they should be patient, see what they really are, and then evaluate further this offseason and into the season next year. Probably the 2025 trade deadline is where a little bit more activity makes sense for Indiana if it doesn't come on draft night this year. The Los Angeles Clippers. Wow, this team is so good, which doesn't surprise me. When the trade for James Harden went down, I said, look, I think this is going to help Paul George, Kawhi Leonard stay healthy. It's going to lessen the load that they have to carry for their offense. We've seen that be true. We've seen Norm Powell have just a fantastic season, pretty much exclusively now playing off the catch instead of having to be a live ball handler for them. And I think really the one thing the Clippers were lacking throughout most of the Kawhi Leonard and Paul George era was that third guy. And yes, the NBA is a lot different now, where stars come together and you play in groups of 2 or 3 a lot of the time. Well, the Clippers, they had their 2 stars, and then the hope at first was Montrezl Harrell and Lou Williams would be, kind of their 3rd and 4th guys, but that just didn't last very long. It didn't work out the way that I think most people expected it to when Kawhi and Paul George first got to LA. So now that they've got their 3rd star, they're really, really darn good. They're pretty much the best team in the league, at least in the Western Conference. Since the trade, they've just been so dominant, including those first few games where they just couldn't buy a win because they were struggling to kind of adjust to playing to each other. Now they're almost unbeatable, and they're just a really darn good team. But with the James Harden trade, with Russell Westbrook coming off the bench and being the player that he is, the Clippers just haven't had a need for Bones Highland. He's been racking up DNP CDs pretty much every single night. I think Ty Lue likes him, but I just don't think there's an actual spot on this roster for him to be used. And in my last trade deadline predictions video, I talked about Mason Plumlee and also PJ Tucker being potentially traded. out of LA, I still think those are real possibilities, but in this video I wanted to talk about more predictions, and Bones Hyland looks like a guy to me who is certainly expendable, and I would be kind of surprised if he's still on the Clippers roster after the trade deadline. It's not, impossible for him to stick around, but I just don't see a role for him as long as one of Harden or Westbrook is really healthy. So I think any way that the Clippers can look to get a little bit more size and length into their team, maybe someone like Jonathan Isaac, they're going to be aggressive in doing something like that. The Lakers, on the other hand, well, this team's going to be active. We already know I talked about DeJounte Murray to start this video, talking about the Atlanta Hawks, and that's just my sole prediction here. I think DeJounte Murray will be a Los Angeles Laker, and when it's all said and done, I don't think it's going to go as well as everyone's going to initially think on trade deadline day when they're like, oh my gosh, they got one-time All-Star DeJounte Murray. I don't think it's going to play out that way, to be honest with you. When it's all said and done, people are going to say, oh my gosh, why does DeJounte Murray not look as good as he did in San Antonio and at times in Atlanta? And the answer is because playing around LeBron James is not made for everybody. And that's not a slight at LeBron. I think LeBron is so freaking talented. What he's doing at 39 years old is insanity. But the reality is, when you put shooters around him and when you put 3-and-D guys around him, your team exceeds all expectations, because he is the greatest elevator of those types of players. But at the same time, he doesn't elevate ball handlers. He doesn't elevate guys who live with the basketball in their hands. Now, he's found success with some of them, Dwayne Wade and Kyrie Irving, but I wouldn't say that those guys were having the best individual seasons of their careers in those moments. And LeBron was just so darn good that the teams were going to be competitive and win most likely anyway. We saw it in 2018 as LeBron took the Cavaliers without Kyrie Irving all the way to the finals again. But DeJounte Murray can be good with the Lakers, and I think LeBron and AD could be good with the Lakers, but I don't think it's going to reach the maximum level of success. Although this is what I expect to have happen, is I expect DeJounte Murray to get traded there. Everyone's going to be super excited for it. Everyone's going to say, wow, they got a super team, 3 All-Stars. And then DeJounte Murray's probably going to average, anywhere from 18 to 20 points a game. But then the Lakers are still not going to be that great of an offensive team. They're still not going to shoot very many threes. They actually shoot the least amount in the NBA right now. There's going to be a lot of flaws still in the roster. And I just don't know if they're going to win like people expect them to, even if they do get DeJounte Murray. Moving on to the Memphis Grizzlies. Let's talk about this team. And, well, they just made a trade. Steven Adams was traded to the Houston Rockets. They got some second-round picks, and I think that really leads into what I'm going to talk about here with Memphis as a team that they're looking to do one more thing. I've got my eyes on them. I talked about them a lot as a Mikal Bridges team. They, of course, had rumored interest in OG Anunoby a year ago at the trade deadline. I think that they're very interested in finding the right piece to the puzzle, and what that means is they're not going to be inactive this trade deadline just because their season's over and because Morant's out and because Baines missed a ton of time and because now they trade Steven Adams and Brandon Clark's rehabbing an Achilles. I know a lot of people are going to say, oh, it's a lost season for them. They shouldn't make any trade or anything like that. I'm not going to stick with that perspective. I think that they are going to be active, hunting for the right player. And if somehow, some way, with all of their tradable draft assets that they have, if they can get their hands on a Mikal Bridges level player, I guarantee you they will do it. But I'm not sure that that comes to fruition. So again, for them, it might be waiting until this summer. It might be waiting until next trade deadline. But really, everything the Grizzlies are doing right now, this is my big prediction for them, everything that they're doing is looking for the right piece to the puzzle. They're going to be aggressive. They're going to be making phone calls. And if a deal doesn't come to fruition, they're okay with that because they're not in a rush. And the one thing that they can offer that other teams can't over the next 4 months leading up until the NBA draft is probably a top 10 pick. They're not very good this year. They have their own draft pick. They're going to be able to send that in a trade. So if a team wants to get Zachary Risa-Share or Alex Sarr or one of the top draft prospects this year, Memphis is going to be a team that can deliver that to them. So we'll see what happens with that draft pick. There's a lot riding on that for Memphis's trade flexibility. Remember, they moved all the way up to number 2 to get John Morant, so maybe they would move up again even. You never know. They could get lucky, and that would really change the trade landscape this year as well. So that's something to keep our eyes on this trade deadline. The Miami Heat For me, they've already made their big trade. They went and got Terry Rozier. Now, the Heat have been struggling over the last couple of weeks or so, but I'm not really ready to hit the panic button on them quite yet. Remember, they kind of limped into the playoffs last year. In fact, they lost their first play-in game last year to the Atlanta Hawks after Clint Capella had a huge game. And I think a lot of people then were sounding the alarms of like, oh my gosh, is Miami even going to make the playoffs? We then know what happened from there. They were the 8th seed. They advanced all the way to the NBA Finals. I'm still not ruling this team out. I still think that they match up very well with the Milwaukee Bucks, even though the Bucks now have Dame and Giannis paired together. I still think that there are flaws in Milwaukee's team construction, now with Doc Rivers as the head coach, that would allow Miami to take advantage of them that way. I still think that the Celtics, who probably are the best team in the Eastern Conference, I've held that belief this entire year. The way that Miami plays and their physicality and some of their strengths with Adebayo being so switchy and being able to guard out on the perimeter a bit, like some of Boston's successes probably will be less successful against Miami. So I think the Heat still probably view themselves as a team that can compete with anybody, and they should feel that way because we just saw it last season. They literally did that and beat everyone in the Eastern Conference. And now with Rozier already in the building, I don't think that there's some other big trade here. I don't think that they're going to deal Hero. I don't see any other massive trade coming for them. Maybe something small, maybe something on the margins. But for me, I think they're going to be locked in here with their current roster moving forward. The Milwaukee Bucks. Let's talk about that team. Obviously now Doc Rivers is the head coach. That's something that's vastly different from my last trade deadline predictions video, which I wasn't expecting Adrian Griffin to get fired with one of the better records in the Eastern Conference. Now Doc Rivers is going to be coaching the All-Star game. This is a crazy world we live in. Just a crazy world. But the Bucks, what do I see them doing? It's shipping out Bobby Portis and potentially Pat Connaughton as well. I don't have Connaughton on the graphic. I probably should have included him. So just imagine that he's on there, because realistically, the Milwaukee Bucks, I just don't think they're good enough to win as constituted currently. I think that they would probably like to have a little bit more reliable three-point shooting that also can defend. And that's a hard thing to find in the league. Malik Beasley gives you the three-point shooting. He doesn't really give you the defense. Bobby Portis, well, he's shooting the ball pretty well this year at times, but it just doesn't feel like Bobby Portis is as impactful as he's been in years past. I don't know how much of that was Mike Budenholzer. I don't know how much of that is Bobby Portis just having kind of a weird year for himself. How do you react to something like that? Those are all questions that John Horst and the Milwaukee Bucks have to figure out. Luckily, I'm not in that position because they don't have very many trade assets to work with, and it's going to be kind of an uphill battle to get something done. But we've heard DeJounte Murray rumors. I don't really believe those. But if there's rumors, that means there's probably a little bit of fire somewhere, and I think the Bucks are going to be a team that is at least aggressive, looking around, trying to figure out some trades to possibly make. And Portis and Connaughton are their two contracts that really make the most sense to get something done at the deadline. The Minnesota Timberwolves, a team that I actually cover. I'm a credentialed NBA reporter, and I'm on the beat for the Minnesota Timberwolves this year. So a lot of fun to talk about this team. They've been playing really great. Chris Finch is now coaching the West All-Stars against Doc Rivers, who's coaching the East All-Stars. If you would have told me that before the year began, I would not have believed you. But look at that. That's where we are right now. And just a lot of great things going on in Minnesota. They're a fantastic team. And I think a reunion with Tyus Jones is possible. Now, I'm not exactly sold that it's going to happen, but my prediction here is that the Timberwolves at least explore discussions on this, and that would probably involve Kyle Anderson's contract, which is an expiring $9.2 million contract. They also have Shake Milton's expiring $5 million contract, or Troy Brown Jr.'s expiring $4 million contract to throw into a deal. They have a collection of second-round picks that they could throw at Washington. They could always maybe turn something into a first-round pick swap in 2024 or 2026 if they so need to do that, or 2028. I don't remember exactly which year the pick with the Jazz is a swap option, but they could go in there and even add that into that too, so they could amend that option as well. And really, if they wanted to, they could go get Tyus Jones. They also have some young players to offer, like Wendell Moore Jr. and also Leonard Miller, which I would hate to see Leonard Miller get traded because I think he's going to be really good. But Tyus Jones might be at the top priority here for Minnesota. A reunion with his hometown team. I don't love it for the Timberwolves, to be honest with you. I don't see him and Mike Conley being a good on-court duo together. And you might say, well, yeah, Tyus is going to be the backup behind Mike Conley. But then why are you making that trade? If you can't play your backup point guard with your actual point guard, it just limits your roster flexibility. Whereas right now, the Timberwolves can play Nickeil Alexander-Walker with Mike Conley because Na is a little bit lengthier and a much better defender. Minnesota loses some of that flexibility if they're playing, for example, Tyus Jones. So I'm not sure if I love this for them, but my prediction is they at least explore this quite a bit. The New Orleans Pelicans, I already made a prediction for them. In the last one, I talked about Kira Lewis Jr. as a player that they would salary dump. He, of course, got salary dumped. They're now below the tax line, so my prediction for them naturally is they stay below the tax line. I know there's rumors about Herb Jones. I don't think they're going to trade him either. I could have maybe even included that on the graphic. They're not going to trade Herb Jones. If they do, it's for someone like Jared Allen. If they make a trade like that, Jared Allen's probably going to be a New Orleans Pelican, but you didn't hear that from me. That's not going to happen, okay? That's my firm take on that. That won't happen, and they're going to stay below the tax. That's everything that I'm seeing here for New Orleans at this current point in time. The New York Knicks, this team is really good. The Knicks are just playing great basketball. And remember, I'm sure some of your favorite people to listen to about basketball, I'm sure some of them told you that the Knicks got fleeced when they traded Emmanuel Quickley and RJ Barrett for OG Anunoby. I just want to point out since then that the Knicks have had the best defensive rating in the league, that they've been just unbeatable, basically. I think they are on a 9-game win streak right now at the time I'm recording this. They are so darn good. They play Tom Thibodeau style of basketball. OG Anunoby was a perfect fit into the team. Now listen, I like Quickley. I think RJ Barrett's playing pretty well for Toronto. But the reality here for the New York Knicks is they got way better making that trade. And I think with what they have on their roster right now, they have another way of getting way better. And that's replacing some of the void that they've lost from Emmanuel Quickley when it comes to bench scoring by getting the 6th man of the year last year, Malcolm Brogdon, who would have been traded now 3 times in about a year and a half, but he's used to it at this point, and he could go back to playing in the Atlantic Division and playing back out east. Moving from the Pacific Northwest in Portland, well, it's a long trip, but something that's worth doing for him and for the New York Knicks. He'd be playing on a significantly better team, and the Knicks have the salaries to do something here. They have Evan Fournier's contract, which they technically could look at as an expiring. It's got a team option. And one thing I have to say here is if they don't trade Evan Fournier, the Knicks might pick up that team option just to use them as a tradable expiring contract next year. So don't rule that out completely because that's a real possibility. But if they do use it this year, someone like Malcolm Brogdon makes a heck of a lot of sense for the New York Knicks. I think he would significantly improve their bench. He's a good shooter. I think you could play him next to Jalen Brunson, which is a big positive of having him. You could have 2 guards on the floor at one time like that. And I know the Knicks have this collection of other nice players in their rotation right now. DiVincenzo, Josh Hart, Anunoby when he's, of course, healthy. The team's been going through a lot of injury issues, and they're still winning a ton of games. It's a testament to how good they are, how well they're built, how much their team identity fits their actual scheme, and how their players all play into that. It's just a really well-built team, which is rare to say about the New York Knicks. In my lifetime, you just didn't have a lot of opportunities to say that, but they're very well-built, and I think Malcolm Brogdon could be the icing on top of the cake to give them just a little bit more juice off the bench, a little bit more scoring punch, and some real needed three-point shooting next to some of their stars as well. So I think, honestly, Malcolm Brogdon to the New York Knicks. Let's get a deal done here. 2024 Mavs first, plus Evan Fournier, plus maybe even Quentin Grimes. You can throw him in there if Portland really wants him. I don't care. Get Malcolm Brogdon to the Knicks. Oklahoma City Thunder. This team seemingly way ahead of schedule to everybody else. I expected this team to be really darn good this year. I don't know if I expected them to be tied for the first place spot in the Western Conference, but it's been super exciting to see them play. They've just done a lot of really great things. And I think that there's a small chance to improve here too. Now, they have all the draft assets in the world. I just made a trade guide on them. I talked about how if they wanted to, they could trade for almost anybody in the league because they could blow any team away with an offer. But it doesn't mean that they're going to do that. In fact, I think that they're very kind of against that idea. I think that they would hate to do something like that because I think that they really like how they're built right now. So let's get someone who just kind of builds up their team a little bit, and that's Kelly Olynyk. He fits perfectly into their style of play. Space the floor. You have your stretch 5 playing out on the perimeter who can handle the basketball a bit. Kelly Olynyk does all of those things. And I think against bigger teams, against say Minnesota or Denver in the postseason, Oklahoma City could probably afford to play Olynyk at the power forward spot next to Holmgren because you're not really trading out a lot of that dribble creativity, the ability to shoot the basketball. It gives you another offensive option to have a player on the perimeter handling the basketball, pushing in transition. Kelly O does that a lot right now for the Utah Jazz. But you also defensively just get a bit bigger, and you match up a little bit better against some of the bigger teams in the league. And when Holmgren's out of the game, probably a little bit more reliability at the center spot behind him, with Olynyk playing the 5 as the backup. The Orlando Magic. Now, listen, this prediction is a little off the wall. My last one was saying that they're going to hold their patience and saying how I don't think this team is going to do anything big. There is one thing that I think they'll explore, though, that is quite big, and this is probably going to be a big shocker for a lot of people. It's DeJounte Murray. Now, remember, I think DeJounte Murray is going to be a Los Angeles Laker. That is my firm prediction for the 2024 NBA trade deadline for the Lakers and for the Hawks. But I think if there's a dark horse team to watch for, a team that gets really close to the finish line, it's the Orlando Magic. They've got tradable contracts like Markelle Fultz and Jonathan Isaac, who fit right in that same price range. So whether it's a 2-team deal or a 3-team deal, the Magic could get involved pretty easily with someone like Markelle Fultz or Jonathan Isaac being a part of the deal and facilitating the money component. They also have a couple former lottery picks in this year's draft in Jet Howard and Anthony Black that if they really wanted to dangle those guys, they definitely could. In search of a point guard upgrade, I think DeJounte Murray would be a massive upgrade to this roster. Really, one of the few flaws on the team right now is they're just point guard minutes, and I think Anthony Black might be the long-term solution there. But Markelle Fultz just isn't the answer to me. So DeJounte Murray could be a big-time upgrade. If the Magic are willing to do that, they have extra draft picks already at their disposal. They sell the 2025 Denver Nuggets first-round pick. So they've got options here. If they want to throw picks, if they want to throw young players out the door in a deal for DeJounte Murray, I think that this deal could really get close. I think this is a dark horse team to watch. But ultimately, my expectation is that Orlando does not get DeJounte Murray. I still think that they're going to be patient, but my prediction is they get closer to acquiring DeJounte Murray than anyone else is currently talking about. I haven't really heard anyone mention DeJounte Murray for Orlando, not that I've seen at least, so maybe I'm missing something. You'll have to let me know down in the comment section, but I think this is actually a really good pairing if the Magic do pursue something a little bit bigger this deadline. Then the Philadelphia 76ers, their whole trade deadline here maybe has gotten thrown for a little bit of a wrench thrown into it because of the Joel Embiid injury. So what are they going to do? Like, do they make big, massive changes to their trade plans because their star player is now going to miss a good deal of time? Maybe. But at the same time, they could still look at it as, hey, if we trade for somebody right now, we can maybe keep our season afloat, and then who knows, maybe Embiid comes back by playoff time. Maybe he'll be fresh, coming off of a rehab. Might be the best playoff run he'll ever have because he'll be fresh, rested, and ready to go. And then off of that buy now move we make at this trade deadline could help us theoretically win a title as soon as this year. And a guy who I like a bit for them would be DeMar DeRozan. The Sixers are a team that, with all of their draft capital they got from the James Harden trade, they're actually working with a little bit of a pick surplus right now. They could go make some bigger move if they wanted to, but DeRozan might not cost a ton to go get. He's 34 years old. The Bulls are really trending toward a rebuild, it seems. So, does one first-round pick plus salary get you there? Maybe you have to attach another young player like Jaden Springer. Maybe it's 2 first-round picks, but with a protection on one of them. The Sixers have that flexibility. They have that 2026 first, which is basically a swap option between 3 teams. It's likely going to be a relatively low pick, so maybe it's 1 solid first-round pick and that one for DeRozan. Is that something you would do to try and maybe open your championship window up this year to try and compete with teams like Miami, Boston, Milwaukee? And I think the answer could be yes. So I think Philadelphia, they're a hard team to kind of peg right now because there's not been a lot of rumors or speculation coming out of the 76ers camp about what they could potentially do. But they've got a ton of options. They could afford to re-sign DeRozan this offseason if they wanted to, but maybe it's a player completely opposite of DeRozan. It could be someone else somewhere in the Western Conference. I don't even know. But I still think that they're a player for a big time piece this trade deadline if they so choose to operate that way. But remember, if they don't, they have free agency cap space this offseason as well. The Phoenix Suns, there's very clearly one thing that they are going to do. And in my last trade deadline predictions video, I talked about how they were going to trade Nasir Little's contract, making a little bit over $6 million. The reason why they're going to trade him is to get a player like this in return, who is playing on the qualifying offer, by the way. It's an expiring contract. That is Miles Bridges of the Charlotte Hornets. I think Miles Bridges makes a ton of sense for Charlotte to trade. I don't really think, given his off-the-court stuff that he's gone through within the last 24 months, that he's someone that the Hornets probably view as a player worth investing a ton of money into long term. And I'm just, with the way that they're not even winning games right now anyway, he could definitely be traded. And Phoenix, a team that's pretty thin on options. They don't have a lot of tradable draft picks. They don't have a lot of young talent. They're in win now mode. Getting a player like Miles Bridges, maybe it's the difference between winning and losing this year. And I know that sounds kind of crazy because Miles Bridges does not help win very much in Charlotte, but he's a really darn good player. Super athletic. He scores the basketball. He can catch and shoot off the three-point line a bit. He does a pretty good job playing off of LaMelo Ball. So I think if you're looking at what he would do for Phoenix as a cutter, as a transition fast break threat, and also just a catch and shoot three-point guy, I think he fits pretty well into Phoenix's team and gives them some more athleticism, which I also think they could badly use, and just honestly raw talent, which Phoenix already has a lot of, but adding one more guy on the floor who's really talented at the cost of maybe a collection of second rounders or a first rounder or a young player, whatever the deal ends up looking like, he would make Phoenix probably a lot better. The Portland Trailblazers, a team that isn't very good this year, but they've had some kind of big wins, so credit to them for that. They got their win in Dame's return as well to Portland, which was an emotional night. Anthony Simons is a baller. Scoot Henderson, I think, is starting to look better and better each and every night. He really looks the part. I'm telling you right now, I've seen him in person this year again. He's so good. I think he's going to end up being really, really good. I'm not changing up on my pre-draft stuff at all. I think that kid is super good at basketball. I think he's going to be really, really, really good a couple of years down the road when there's more talent around him. And once he's really settled in to the NBA game, he just looks and moves like a high-quality guard in the league. But they do have a player right now who doesn't play for them because he's injured, Robert Williams III. And before the trade for Steven Adams, I thought Robert Williams was a player who made sense for Houston. A reunion with Ime Udoka would have made a ton of sense, in my opinion, as a backup big behind Alperen Şengün. That did not come to fruition, of course. So now Portland, if they're looking to trade him, is going to be to a team not named the Houston Rockets, which is okay. But they'll have to figure out what that partner looks like. I think the Dallas Mavericks could make some sense. I think the Golden State Warriors could make some sense. And I think if you look across the Eastern Conference, there's a bunch of teams that would probably have real interest in acquiring Robert Williams as well. I think the Boston Celtics would have interest in reacquiring Robert Williams at the cost of a first-round pick. So we'll see what happens, but I think Portland will be open to trading him if the right package comes along this trade deadline. The Toronto Raptors, a team that, well, they've sold. And because of that, now they're at a spot where they are projected to keep their pick currently, which is top 6 protected, traded to San Antonio. So that's a good sign for them. And they're just headed towards a rebuild anyway, so trading Bruce Brown just makes sense. I expect him to get dealt for probably something in the equivalent value range of 1 first-round pick plus something else small. So does that mean 4 or 5 second-rounders plus something else? Maybe. Does that mean 1 first-round pick plus something small? Maybe. Something like that. The Raptors get incentivized to deal him. His contract is rather short-term, although it is a higher price point. I still think he could help teams significantly. I'm sure a lot of teams will have interest in acquiring his services because he's a unique player, smaller guard who can also still set screens and rolls and plays off the baseline, and he defends across multiple positions. He's not a stopper, but he's a good team defender. I think there's a lot of things that he just is a good player. So I think he could help a bunch of different teams. So we'll see if Toronto actually moves him or not. Sacramento. I like the Sacramento Kings a lot. I think that De'Aaron Fox and Domantas Sabonis should have both been All-Stars. They both got snubbed, which is crazy to me, especially Fox. Fox has been so good this year. So that's shocking. But if you're a Kings fan, you still got to be hyped because you still have trade flexibility this year. And I think if they're going to do something, it'll be centered around a wing/forward who can shoot the basketball and makes anywhere from $25 million and below. In the most recent trade deadline predictions video, I talked about Kyle Kuzma a lot. I still think he's probably the most likely outcome. But in a world where they don't want to trade as much draft capital to get Kyle Kuzma, I thought someone like Bojan Bogdanovic made some sense. A post-up player who you can post up mismatches, but he's also just a really good darn catch and shoot guy, just an offensive weapon. Now, this doesn't make Sacramento's defense much better. In fact, I would argue it makes it worse. So probably not the way that most Kings fans want to see the management go in that direction of, oh, is Monty McNair really going to make our defense worse at the trade deadline? I understand that idea, but at the same time, getting a bit more juice back in their offense, where last year they were so electric, this year they've just maybe fallen down a step or two. I think Bojan Bogdanovic could be a nice addition, and again, he's right in that price point that makes sense for them financially going forward. They have Davion Mitchell's contract to trade. They have Sasha Vezenkov's contract to trade. They've got some of those movable pieces right in that anywhere from $5 to $7, $8, $9, $12 million range. They also have Harrison Barnes. We'll see what the Kings do, but a guy like Bojan Bogdanovic or Kyle Kuzma or one of these forward types that can shoot the basketball, they would all be pretty beneficial there in Sacramento. The Spurs, last time I talked about them getting a point guard and finding a guard that made some sense for their roster long-term as a little spark plug for Victor Wembanyama and just generating good offense, because we've seen how good Trey Jones has been for that team this year, and I think that they could get another ball handler and get even better. In this video, though, I'm talking about them trading away Doug McDermott. He's an expiring contract. I expect the Minnesota Timberwolves to have interest in him, as will many other contending teams. If you're looking for a shooter, Doug McDermott has a good track record of being a good, high-quality three-point shooter on lower volume than maybe you'd want your sniper to be playing on, but he shoots the ball so darn well. He's got decent positional size, so he's not this huge defensive liability. I don't think he's a good defender by any means, but he's not like he's like 6'2" out there. It's not like the Seth Curry effect where you're playing this little tiny guard who's going to get hunted a bunch. McDermott's got forward size, so he could fit in next to a team. He doesn't have as much juice, obviously doesn't do a ton with the live handle or anything like that, but he could help a bunch of different teams as either the 9th, 10th guy. I could see Boston maybe even being a suitor for him now that I'm thinking about that as well. Doug McDermott's going to have some suitors around the league, and I think San Antonio ultimately does trade him at the deadline. The Utah Jazz, talked about Lauri Markkanen in the last one, saying how I just do not expect him to get traded and how I think the Jazz are going to hold a firm grip on him as a player that they just view as the face of their franchise right now, which is understandably so. He's one of the most talented forwards in the league. He shoots the ball extremely well, plays off the catch at a great level. They've just got someone who's really, really good. He came into his own in Utah, and they should feel very happy about the way he's played in the last 2 years with them. But we talked about him earlier. I'm not going to rehash all of the things Kelly Olynyk does, but we know he's probably someone who is expendable. Now, this is Danny Ainge's guy. Both of them come from a similar background, drafted him in Boston, so Danny Ainge really likes Kelly Olynyk. Traded for him from Detroit, made it a big deal to go get him when he came to Utah, which is, important to look at. Danny Ainge probably just doesn't love the idea of trading away Kelly Olynyk, but for a first-round pick, that's something that makes some sense to Danny Ainge. Anytime he hears a draft pick, he probably gets pretty excited. So that's something I could still see happening, and I did want to touch on that as the prediction here for the Utah Jazz. Then the Washington Wizards, good old Washington, and they've got this trade exception sitting over there that's worth a little bit more than $12 million. And where does Michael Winger come from again? Oh, that's right, the Los Angeles Clippers. So why doesn't he hop in, help out the Clippers, probably get a second-round pick or something? Maybe Brandon Boston, that should be in this graphic too. Brandon Boston was playing second quarter minutes the other night in Washington. You might say, well, who cares? It was like game 47 of the regular season, not a big deal. It's a big deal. Right before the trade deadline, all of these guys who are usually out of the rotation, all of a sudden they're finding minutes in Washington. They're finding minutes in these weird spots in games when, hey, let's showcase this guy a little bit. Let's see how he's playing. And Brandon Boston played really well in Washington. So I'm going to say it. PJ Tucker's contract plus Brandon Boston both go to the Washington Wizards, maybe in separate trades, whatever way that they've got to structure it. I think the Wizards have a couple of trade exceptions, actually. So they're probably able to take in both of them in separate deals. But regardless, what I see happening here, the Wizards eat up PJ Tucker's contract, probably buy him out. He would then go to someone like Phoenix or Milwaukee or one of these other contending teams, help them out this season. The Wizards get draft capital and maybe a young player in return. And the player I see most likely right now is Brandon Boston from the Clippers, who Michael Winger I know has experience with from his time there in LA, and probably would be okay with that given where the Wizards currently are at in the standings as well. Thank you everyone for watching. Really had a great time talking about all 30 NBA teams in this video. It's one of my favorite things to do on YouTube, is to talk about all 30 NBA teams. I love doing that. I hope you guys enjoyed as well. If you did, make sure to leave a like, subscribe to the channel for more content. And then don't forget, come join me in the live stream. If I'm live on the channel right now, I want you in there. Go hop in, say hi to me, ask what's up. Let's get some Q&As going where you're asking me what your favorite team might do, will do, should do. I'll be answering all of that and more during my trade deadline live streams all week long. Thanks guys so much, and we'll catch you in the very next Utility Sports video.